Ladies and gentlemen, this is David Mirikitani with another episode of Weighing In. We are brought to you by USA Wrestling, the national governing body for wrestling in the United States, and by Nike Wrestling. Go to athleteps.com for all of your Nike and USA Wrestling branded gear. Our guy GT is, I don't know if he's en route, Mark, or has arrived for the Greco World Cup, but he's, if you don't follow Grant on Instagram or Twitter, anybody, you should. He posts the interesting meal of the day, the interesting food of the day, and he's a pretty smart guy about wrestling. So how are you doing, Marco?
I'm doing good, David.
So
yeah, Grant's doing the Greco thing that I still don't get yet, but I mean, he's phenomenal. He's got a great background in it, so he knows everybody.
He's doing best in the world stuff, which we all get. Like, you know, when you get to, we're all shooting, we want this to be the best podcast it can be. Anytime you're rubbing elbows at that level. Yeah. You know, like I was out with some guys last night and we were watching the World Series and they're like, you like baseball? And I'm a St. Louis guy, so you kind of grew up with baseball in the background all the time. And I'm like, I'll watch the World Series. Like I'm not a day-to-day hockey fan, but I'll watch the playoffs. Like I'll watch the Kentucky Derby. I'll watch, you know, like the last round of the Masters. I like golf, but like I'm not going to probably watch some tournament in February the way I'm going to watch the Masters, US Open, etc. So shout out to, just because right now the US isn't one of the 5 or 6 best teams in the world doesn't mean Greco's not freaking awesome. And to be with the best of the best. And we should remind people this, we really focused on it in freestyle because we have the men's and women's freestyle team in those events and it's here in the United States. But though they took the top 5 countries in Greco and then created an all-star team for the 6 teams. So you're going to see some unbelievable wrestling. It's going to be absolutely awesome. So
without a doubt.
So for people, if anybody's new, welcome this week. This started several years ago at Track Wrestling, and it was really just to talk about the rankings, which Mark had done with me for several years. Did a ton of great work in the background and finally got him out front where he deserved to be, because that was definitely a partnership. It used to be that we just kind of did it, did this podcast October to March and then kind of faded away till next October. And, obviously USA Wrestling is, a lot of their events are in the spring, summer, fall. So it's become a 12-month of the year thing. But I feel like if GT had to miss a podcast this season, this is the time of the year where it's okay. We're in our wheelhouse, right, Marco?
Yeah, this is an exciting time for both of us, David, with, everything's getting started this weekend. So there's tournaments, there's duels, there's actually some pretty good duels, with Lehigh and Oregon State and Iowa State, Wisconsin. I mean, there's going to be some great matches. So it'd be nice to finally see, what we talked about for the last 7 or 8 weeks, predicting what might happen. Now we start getting to see it.
Yeah. And there's a few people that know, but really how this podcast started was several years ago. You and me, we just talked about this stuff all the time. We played in contests and we kind of looked at rankings and thought guys that would do better than their ranking, or maybe some guys that weren't ranked where we thought they would be. And it's evolved into this. So I think college wrestling has this whole different set of fans, where like you live in Iowa, the people in Iowa know, like say an Abe Assad or Nelson Brands, who are very good wrestlers but haven't won national titles. They know their stat lines and everything better than they might know, maybe even like Seth Gross, who made a world team, So and I won't say fights, but the arguments about who are going to win are really fun. And, you and I don't always agree, and that's really fun. And where guys should be ranked, we certainly didn't always agree, and that was really fun. So, and you were usually right, and that's why you're with me in front of the camera. So we'll start out with the individual rankings. Actually, I'm sorry. I did a play-by-play for Ottawa and Baker on Tuesday night. The Coach Crank and their crew out at Ottawa brought us out, and that gym it's freaking awesome. They had their own link, but a couple things. Those guys are super professional. Mark, Jason Keck and I walk in. Headsets are plugged in, soundboard set up. Both lineups are there in front of us. Actually, all 4 lineups, women's and men. We had the credentials from all the Ottawa guys and what they had done. And then we had pulled up the NAIA rankings to kind of figure out like who were the favorites. And there's a couple matchups where like number 15 was hitting 16, and I think number 5 and 6 wrestled. So we were able to highlight like this is kind of the match of the night. That place was raucous, and I think that's the other thing that that college wrestling's awesome about, right? Like it's, you know, like Iowa has sold out. So like we're going to be at the Iowa Oklahoma State meet. Last year we were at the Iowa Penn State meet, and these places go crazy. I mean, they go absolutely nuts. I think the other thing that is always great for me, selfishly, is when I do these play-by-plays, are you sometimes forget, because we get on the air and talk about the highest level stuff, right? Like sometimes you forget that not everybody wrestles at that highest level. And there's plenty of people that just freaking love wrestling, and they're good wrestlers, and they're good coaches, and they're doing good things. And wrestling's making people, it's an avenue to help make people better in the world. And it's serving its purpose at smaller colleges and universities around the country. And so to watch the Ottawa University team, the Baker University team, that Baker University women's team is freaking good, man. They're really good. They pitched a shutout. They had a couple open weights, kids that hadn't certified yet, but pitched a shutout. And Ottawa men's team beat the Baker team, but a ton of great matches. So, you know, you guys in Iowa have a ton of non-Division I colleges and universities. Missouri's got several. So it's just, I'm sure I say this every year, but it's a good reminder, because we spend most of our time swimming in one end of the pool. And we need to remember that the other end is just as important. You know, it's a pyramid, and that without that base, you don't have the top part.
I agree 100%. I mean, in Iowa, you got, you know, I think there's 4 or 5 junior colleges now that have wrestling, which in the past it was kind of 2, David, Ellsworth and Iowa Central. Now you got Nyack, and you got Council Bluffs has a team.
Iowa Western, yeah.
Iowa Western. You've got up in
is Indian Hills in Iowa?
Westerville, Indian Hills is in Iowa. Kirkwood had a team at one time. I'm not sure they still have. I don't think they have one now. But
and Waldorf was a junior college, and now they're, I think, NAIA or Division III. And then there's a ton of.
You got Wartburg, who's won so many Division III titles. You got Upper Iowa's now Division II school. So Grandview, the best there is in, you know, NAIA. So I mean, you can go on and on. There's always wrestling in Iowa. Doesn't matter what level you're on. And you're going to get good kids. I mean, people know who these kids are, and they follow them. So it's kind of fun.
Yeah, yeah. So thanks to and Jimmy May and Adam Venegas over at Baker. They've had us out before. I think they're trying to get us on their schedule for later this year. But thanks for all the kind feedback for people that talked about our play-by-play. Thanks to Jason Keck for the hospitality, scooping me up from the train station, letting me crash at his place, and work from there, and then doing the duel with me. He's super good on the mic, very smart. My man was writing up pronunciation guides. So like that's, you know, it's nice to work with people that take it seriously, you know, that don't just think, well, I know wrestling, so I'm going to just be smart about it. So speaking of guys that I've worked with that take it seriously, Hardell Moore is going to be the new color commentator for Oklahoma State University on their home duels. I think most people, if they follow this, know that Ardell and I are good friends, talking to him about some other stuff, and he told me that. And Leroy Smith, who I'm actually working with on the National Wrestling Hall of Fame duels, has decided to step down from that play-by-play role. Leroy's been a joy to work with, super intellectually generous, and Hardell and I have an absolute blast whenever we get to talk about anything together. And he very, very magnanimously said, you know, hey, all this play-by-play stuff for me, David, started with you at the Perry Tournament of Champions 6-7 years ago, which it was. So shout out to Ronnie Delk for bringing us down there, you know, at the time, that state championship team. And I don't even know how that came about. I can't honestly remember, but talk about a small town where wrestling is really important, Perry, Oklahoma. But Hardell and I doing that, and we've been able to branch out and do world championships and Olympic trials and the Big 12s and, you know, the OSU color commentary gigs, pretty big stuff. So congrats to Hardell, and I know you like listening to him when he's on the air.
I do, and I don't think Oklahoma State could have hired a better individual to do it. They're not going to miss a beat once he gets behind there and does the color for him. And Leroy Smith is a legend, obviously. Hardell Moore is just so comfortable behind that mic, and he's got a wealth of knowledge. He's going to do a phenomenal job. I can't wait to listen to him. Yeah,
me too. It's always interesting when you listen and you know the guy's doing the commentary, right? Like it's you know, like I watch the PFL and Randy Couture and I are friends, and sometimes I'll be texting him during it, and you know, if it's like on a commercial, text me back, you know. So it's also when you do those commentaries, you watch and listen to people that you think are good, and you try to, I don't know, steal's the wrong word, you try to emulate the good things that these people do. So it's fun to watch those guys. I also want to thank the University of Virginia. I got hired to do 3 of their duels this year. So excited about that. ACC wrestling is really good, and I got to do 1 last year and get to do 3 this year. So that's fun for me. It's exciting, and those folks at ACC, ESPN, and the UVA folks specifically really do a great job of getting you on the air. And big shout out to those guys, because I know nothing about. On a good day, I know a little bit about the people wrestling and how to talk about wrestling, but how to get on the air is a complete mystery to me. So. All right. So one piece of bad news, and it hasn't been validated, I don't think, but I saw from a fairly reliable source that Ja'Cory Teemer's got a torn pec, which would obviously impact Arizona State in a less than ideal way. We're trying to get our picks as close as we can to accurate. You know, we had him both picked Mark to be in the finals, so I'm going to change my pick to basically what Grant had. I had Ja'Cory and Quincy. You had Ja'Cory and Brayton Lee, and he had Brayton Lee and Quincy. So I'm going to make the same pick GT did for the finals. I don't know what you want to change yours to.
I think I'll stay with Brayton Lee, and then I'm going to go with North Carolina's 157-pounder.
AOC. Austin O'Connor.
Yep.
Right. All right. So that's just a little bit of housekeeping. So big story. The National Wrestling Hall of Fame has announced their class of 2023. The distinguished members going in are Rich Bender, Jimmy Jackson, Patricia Miranda, Joe Williams, speaking of Iowa legends. Order of Merit is Frank Popolizio. Medal of Courage is Richard Perry. Outstanding American is Bob Bowlesby. And Meritorious Official is Ed Kelly. So I know several of these people personally. Probably I got a chance to talk to Matt Bowlesby, Bob's son, yesterday, and he said, and I want to say this, he was as surprised as anyone. And what I mean by that is I guess they don't tell them early, which is cool. You don't have to kind of sit on it. Joe Williams was an absolute beast. I know you coached Stevie, his brother, and coached against TJ, his brother. We both did. And I know Frank Pop, he does great things in the wrestling world. And Rich Bender is technically our boss. So obviously we know all about all of these people. And if you haven't ever been to the Hall of Fame banquet, it's a pretty cool event. I've been a couple times. I think the most recent time was either for Eric Guerrero's induction or Randy Couture's induction. I can't remember which one was the more recent one, but both were a couple years apart. So pretty awesome class of 2023, huh?
I agree. I think they keep hitting it right on the head. And, you know, Joe Williams, you know, obviously I didn't know Joe real well, but he used to come to Iowa Central and watch Stevie, and he did it. You know, he got on the mat a couple times with us, and just such a quiet, reserved young man. You know, he didn't boast about the things he could do. He just went out and did it. So congrats to him and his family. I'm sure TJ will be in there someday also. because he had quite a career at the University of Iowa also. I think if Stevie wouldn't have passed away, he started coaching. He would have done some great things. So, yeah, good family.
And all of them were, I want to make sure I say this right, they were all Twisters, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, so shout out to Q and what he had done up there. So, anyway, that'll be, I think, in June. So there's going to be, last year they did it tied to the Final X that was there, I think, or the announcement of it. But it's a pretty cool event. So I'm sure the Hall of Fame will get those details out. I think we should both take a minute and just congratulate Rich Bender. I don't know how well you know Rich, but I know Rich fairly well. Like my dad goes fishing with him and John Smith at least once a year down there. And Rich has been really good to my family, treats my mom and dad. I mean, most people love my parents, even if they don't like me, and they should, but treats my parents really well, and was another guy that was very encouraging to me when we first started doing rankings and doing interviews and podcasts when I really had no idea what the hell I was doing at all. Him, Gary Abbott, Scott Casper, three of the guys that if they just reach out to you and say, hey, good work, like those three words from those three guys, means a lot. So, like you mentioned, like, the relationship you have with my dad and those kind of guys that are sort of giants in the sport. And when they say something, it carries a lot more weight than just somebody else, even if the kindness level is the same. So personally want to give, I forgot. I was actually at the Hall of Fame banquet a couple of years ago when Gary Abbott went in. That's the most recent one I went to. Yeah. So, yeah. Which was a really cool experience. And now that was during COVID. So like you didn't get to hear the speeches and stuff. They were all spread out and everything. So, but yeah. Anyway, any words about Rich before we make our...
Yeah, I've only met Rich once, David. Obviously, I'm kind of in the background, so I don't know him near as well as you. I just, he's somebody that if you say his name, everybody knows basically who he is, and that he's affiliated with USA Wrestling, has helped make this entity so great. And without USA Wrestling, I'm not sure wrestling in the United States is even near where it's at right now, especially on the world level. So,
yeah.
What else can you say? Can you get a better compliment than that, David?
No, I think, you mentioned hit the nail on the head when we, use that line with something else earlier, and that's absolutely hitting it out of the park. It's a blessing to be able to know like the Gary Abbotts and Rich Benders, because every once in a while I get to talk to them and pick their brains about super high level stuff. And, like Bill Zadek, talking to him and James Green and Joe Russell, like during wrestling, like how their brains work about certain things. Like Rich Bender's super high level, sees things very, very intelligently, kind of sorts through the morass. Pete Isaias is another guy like that. Gary Abbott's, like most of the people at USA Wrestling, because they've been around for so long, they've seen so much. They were smart people to begin with, but they process what they have and become smarter. And so that's it's a blessing, to ever talk to somebody like that in that field. But for you and I to be able to wear what we're wearing right now, USA Wrestling stuff, we do that quick read at the beginning, but I mean, honestly, for me to be on the airwaves, it's a dream come true to be on a platform like USA Wrestling. Like, so, and Rich Bender might be the best storyteller in the business. I've had him on the podcast probably once a year when things happen. Absolutely unbelievable. And I won't go through the whole story, but he basically saved my podcast with Art Martori by giving me several nuggets, which I finally asked one question the right way and got the dialogue going. So my mom's a communications teacher, and that's the one podcast I wouldn't want her to evaluate. It wasn't very good. So,
well, you're probably a little intimidated too going in, David, because
I was terrified.
So much sport, so yeah.
I was absolutely terrified, but that doesn't matter, right? Like, winners win. You got to get it done when it counts. And, as kind as you're being now about that, you're like, dude, do better. Like you got to do better. you get to talk to a guy that hardly anybody talks to. You need to ask the right questions. You need to get the right answers out of a person that anybody who understands wrestling wants to hear that man talk. And
I remember at David, I do remember at Nationals this past year, first time we did interviews for USA Wrestling, because we always did them for track.
Yeah.
And I think it was probably the second interview I did. I didn't do something right with the camera, and Gary Abbott pulled me over and said, "Hey, you get one chance at this. You screwed up. Don't do it again." Because I did something with the camera. And I mean, when somebody like Gary Abbott says that to you, you say, "Okay, Gary, sorry." And then you don't screw up again. That's just kind of the way it is.
It's also, to be fair, Gary Abbott was super complimentary of the work, you know, that you did. And, you know, like he's a fair boss, you know, like he's like, "Hey, you I watched some of those. They were great. You got a ton of volume, you know, like, but yeah, you're right. But this is a whole different podcast we could do, but it's about when you get to be lucky to surround yourself with greatness, you try to level up. So, you know, that's a very cool thing. So, okay. National Wrestling Hall of Fame.org or NWHOF.org is probably the best article on who's going into the Hall of Fame. And so we're going to talk about team picks, Marco. We'll get GT's picks next week. And then if we get to time, we'll get to Iowa State versus Wisconsin. If we don't get time, people should watch that duel. Like, depending on the team rankings, or 2 top 10 teams. I think Flo has them ranked 9 and 10. I'm using that because they did a preview on it. It's probably the easiest way for us to go through and see if we agree or disagree with their picks. But the match that really everybody wants to see is 165. David Carr probably not cutting nearly as much weight this year, up a weight. He talked about it, you know, he's chasing, he's the chaser, not being chased, you know, not being the defending champ. And up a weight and wrestling Dean Hamidi, who does not know how to wrestle a 2-to-1 match. And I mean that in the best possible complimentary way. Like, there's going to be a ton of, I don't know if there'll be a ton of points, but there'll be a ton of flurries that, you know, they will not just stand around and look at each other like we see at some matches at a high level. And I don't mean it, there's hand fighting and things going on, but there will be shots taken, passovers done, scrambles ensuing. So if we don't get to that, then we'll talk about it. So, all right.
Don't be surprised if somebody ends up on their back in that match, David.
No, I would agree.
Either way.
Yeah, and I could see whoever gets on their back coming back and winning, you know, like, yeah. The other thing, like at the Ottawa duel, we saw some stuff early in the year where, like, I would say 5 of the 10 matches could have gone the other way. You know, like, tactically stuff happened. It's, you know, it's the one scramble, right? Like, you know, you and me are 1-1 and I'm in on your leg and, you know, you limp leg out and score. Instead of it being 3-1 me, it's 3-1 you. It's a 4-point swing. Well, I might finish that shot next time. You might get in on a shot next time and win by 2 takedowns, but to say you're just going to win 3-1 or 3-2 every time, it's not that convincing. And so you saw several matches like that. All right, so we're going to pull up. Okay, just going to read through these. So here's intermatch rankings. They've got Penn State 1, Iowa 2, Arizona State 3, Ohio State 4, Missouri 5, Michigan 6, Cornell 7, Minnesota 8, Wisconsin 9, Nebraska 10. Win has Penn State 1, Iowa 2, Arizona State 3, Missouri 4, Cornell 5, Minnesota 6, Michigan 7, Nebraska 8, Ohio State down at 9, Oklahoma State at 10. And for example, in intermat, Oklahoma State is tied for 12th, but only half a point out of 11th. And then Flo, Penn State, Iowa, Arizona State, Ohio State, Michigan, Missouri, Nebraska, Cornell, Minnesota, Northwestern, Wisconsin, Oklahoma State at 12. And then you see a ton of the Virginia Techs, Princetons, Iowa States, Pittsburgh, North Carolina State type of teams. So a couple ways to do this, Mark. We can either, I think we're about 25, 30 minutes in. So I don't know that we're going to super deep dive all these weights. Let's just talk about some things that can swing things. Like maybe, so if you look at Penn State, you know, I always like to look at this when we were like, well, what do we think? Like at 25, they'll be ranked in the top 33 by everybody with Robbie Howard. But, and again, let's set the table. 20 points for first, 16 for second, 13.5 for third, 12.5 for fourth, 10 for fifth, 9 for sixth, 6.5 for seventh, 5.5 for eighth. Win Magazine was the first people to rank them that way instead of 16 for first because they added the advancement points, which was congratulations to Brian Van Clee and those guys. Very, very smart. It's how we used them for our rankings. If you make the round of 12, it's worth 2 points. If you're 13 to 16, it's 1.5 points. 17 to 24 is 1. And 25 to 33, you went 0-2, so you didn't score. But again, this does not take bonus points into account. There are probably in some matches more bonus points at nationals than there are in a duel. Because like if you're beating me by 5 or 6 with 10 seconds left in a duel, my job might be to not get taken down.
Mm-hmm.
Where if I'm at nationals, like I'm going to throw a Hail Mary and I might throw myself to my back. I might get pinned or at least might give up the takedown and a decision becomes a major kind of thing. And then also, you know, a lot of times, like if it's, again, 11, 12, 13, sometimes you see a person go for broke and get teched or pinned. So these rankings include placement points and advancement points, but not bonus points, okay? So Penn State, they have big points with Roman Bravo Young, who's first, Sirachi, who's first, Aaron Brooks, who's first, and Max Dean, who's first. And there's no reason to think those guys won't win it. They all are defending champions. But let's say this, they can't do better than first. And if you go, well, they're going to score bonus. Yeah, everybody in the country has that, but we didn't have their bonus. Like Dayton Fix is ranked second, but we didn't count his bonus, you know. You can go through every week, like, you know, and then same thing with like a Spencer Lee, you know, first. So I think as you think about it at Penn State, you know, like what they've got is a sort of a stars. They only have 5 guys, I think, scoring points, like major points. It's those 4 guys in Kirkfleet. You know, they've got, I think a guy you really like, Bartlett's down at 41, Van Ness is in at 49. They're a little bit of a question mark at 57, Facundo at 65, and then they got Murderer's Row on the back end that we talked about. So it seems to me like Intermat's got them at 100. Penn State, I'm sorry, Wynn has them at 97, and Flo's got them at 99.5. So that sort of 98, 99, you know, 98 to 100 range. If we say you pick the over-under, you're going to pick the over just on bonus alone. So let's exclude bonus. On placement points, do you think like 98, give or take, is about right for Penn State?
I think it's over. I think they're closer to 110.
So you think it's under? You think they're going to score more?
Yes.
So you see the 4 guys winning then. You have to see at least 3 of the 4 guys winning. And then you see a couple guys that aren't on the podium now getting on the podium. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Who specifically are you thinking is going to podium? I think I know, but
I think Haynes can podium at 57. I think he's legit. We'll find out, but I think he's going to be up there. I don't think they have him getting any points. And it's not just being on the podium. If he gets into the round of 12, David, he's going to score 2.5 points where they didn't have that before. So 2 points. You know, Facundo's, I think, is going to be right there to be an All-American also. I think he's going to be right there on the round of 12. If he wins that match, depending on his draw, he's going to get some extra points. Robbie Howard did really well. He got hurt last year, didn't get to do anything. So I think he could be right there in the round of 12 also. So I count round of 12 as getting points that they're not projected to get. And so I kind of like that.
Yeah.
So,
Now, to be fair, just so people understand, like if a source has Robbie Howard ranked at 18th, they have him scoring one of those 2 points.
yep.
So just so people understand that. So
Yep.
and here's what I'm going to do, just because I think it's more entertaining for me to disagree with you than agree with you. Here's the argument I'll make. I'm going to make one argument for you, and I think Bartlett's probably their best chance of placing of the guys that aren't ranked to place, because I think 41 is the most wide open weight. Like, I think Facundo is really good, but 165 is absolutely stupid stacked. 57 is not as stacked, especially if Teamer's hurt. There's another slot. But 25 is really good. So, I mean, Robbie Howard's really good, but it's going to have to get through some guys that have been on the podium a bunch, finalists, Spencer Lee kind of people, Vito's, Glories, that kind of stuff. I think, like, Bo Bartlett, let's put it this way. If you took a guy of Bo Bartlett's skills, 41 is probably the most likely place he would make the finals. You know, because you go, could Bo Bartlett wrestle with Cole Matthews and Real Woods and those guys? Like, yeah, he'd probably one takedown match from those guys right now. So something to think about. The argument against Penn State, which is a really dumb one to make, but I'll make it, is they got 4 guys ranked number 1, and it's hard to, you know, like if one of those guys lost in the finals, like Starachi beat Mackay in overtime, okay, so, you know, like that match could get flipped. Like 97, I think, you know, Max Dean, because he had lost a match during the year, we thought, well, maybe he's not going to win. You know, I think Aaron Brooks is a big favorite, but Parker Keckheisen's really good. Obviously, Roman Bravo Young's a favorite, and he seems to have Dayton Fix's number, but if Dayton Fix were an NCAA champion this year, I don't think that would shock a lot of people on the surface. So, but betting against Penn State in the finals is a fool's task. Like, those guys close the show out, you know, maybe is better than anybody's when Dan Gable was coaching. So,
and actually, Kirk Fleet could be a finalist also, David, at heavyweight.
Yeah,
it would not surprise me one bit.
So that's the argument too. Okay, so you and I talked about this off air, but I firmly believe that Gable Stevenson's coming back. And what people go is, oh, okay, well, so Minnesota would get 20 more, which we talk about. But that bumps everybody down a slot. Like, there's one less spot in the finals, right? Like, and if Colton Schultz goes from 1 to 2, then that means whoever was 2 goes down to 3. Whoever was 3 goes down to 4. And, you know, it's kind of like last year. Like, you just wanted to be on the bottom side of the bracket. Like, you'd rather have been seated 6th or 7th than 4th or 5th, because you're not going to beat Gable unless you just pull a Larry Owings type of upset. So, so I would say that I'm going to agree with you. I think Penn State goes over that, but you know, it's just because I believe in them so much in the finals, which is, you know, basically built into your picks as well. Okay, so number 2, Iowa 76.5, Iowa 74.5, Iowa 76.5. Okay, so I'll go first here. I mean, they're ranked number 1 at 25. And I'm just talking about who they got ranked, like in the top 8, not ranked at 33. 41, they're ranked in the top 3. And when I say this, like, it's just consensus based on all the different ones. 49, I think Murin's knocking on the door. 57, I think they're knocking on the door. 65, they're young. 74, they're with Brands and then Assad. Those guys aren't ranked. And then you got Warner ranked real high, and you got Cassiope ranked real high. So to me, the upside is Iowa's got some good guys. Like, if, you know, like Kennedy placed, if Nelson Brands placed, if Abe Assad placed, you know, like, those guys are really good. They could do it. You know, if Max Murin went from 9th to 8th, that's a significant jump. It's 3.5 points. You know, the downside for them is, you know, Jacob Warner's ranked really high, and that was the first year he made the finals. Cassiope's in a weight where we feel like the best guy in the best college guy in the country. And I mean, I understand people that love Spencer Lee, but when you're the Olympic champion, you're the best college guy in the country. Comes in, so you have to wrestle over your rank now just to get back to where you were, your points were ranked. Yep. And Spencer Lee's on a pitch count. And I mean, they as much as said so. And when you're on a pitch count, by definition, you're not 100%. And if Spencer Lee doesn't wrestle, like what happened last year, you're pulling 20 points out of your lineup, and more than 20 when we count bonus. But again, we're not counting bonus right now. So I would put them at slightly under, because I think, and I might be in the minority on this, but I think if Spencer Lee's not 100%, you should sit him this year, let him wrestle next year, and go right into the Olympic trials. So I'm assuming you have Iowa going over.
No, I would imagine this. My philosophy is they're going to have a hard time scoring that much, because they got guys that have not done it yet. You know, obviously 25, they're unknown. Even if Brody Teske wrestles, he's been round of 12 twice at 25, though this isn't 125 pounds, it's 133 pounds. It's a pretty good weight bracket. So, I mean, he's got a lot to prove. Shriver at the same weight, I think, has every opportunity to do the same thing that Brody does. 41 is kind of an unknown. I just don't know, you know, how good that weight is right now. I'm kind of looking forward to the next few weekends to see what happens there.
Well, the All-Star meet will tell us a lot, right?
And Real Woods is a phenomenal wrestler, but he hasn't put together the whole year yet. So he's lost to guys that would kind of shock you. So we'll see what happens there. Max Murin, love the kid. I love the way he wrestles. He goes out there and it's a dogfight. I kind of like those type of people, but it hasn't been on the podium yet. So you're giving a lot of ifs and buts on whether or not these guys are going to. Kennedy, I mean, they're going to be a really good dual team, because they're not going to have any major holes. You're not going to go out there and say, yeah, we're going to get bonus points here, because it's probably not going to happen against most teams. You know,
no, I don't think you have a weight where you go, we're probably going to lose this weight, you know, more than 50% of the time. I don't think they have that.
Yep. But I think a lot of teams are going to be like that this year, David, except for Penn State. So I'm going to put them a little bit under, but I still think they're the second best team in the country. Let's put it that way.
Right. And I think the second best team in the country argument got a lot clearer with if teamers hurt. So Arizona State, they've got All-American at 25. They got All-American at 33. They had a guy that was top 24 before he got hurt at 41. They've got All-American at 49. They either have a super talented All-American or a hole at 57. Okay. 65, they're young. Oh, they've got Negron. And I talked to those guys out there. They love him. Think he's super good. Okay. But has never placed. Okay. Didn't even start. 74, Kyle Valencia, super young, talented, hasn't done it yet. 84, Montalvo, transfer, round of 12 guy, I think at Oklahoma State 2 years ago. 97, Norfleet back, who's could place or could go 1 and 2. And then Schultz. So their team's a lot like Iowa, honestly. Yep. The difference is I think they have maybe one more sort of lock All-American. Like I think Iowa's got 3 lock All-Americans. If you go, well, 4, they got 4, like it's 3.5, right? It depends if Spencer wrestles, but with Woods, Warner, and Cassiope. And with Arizona State, you expect Courtney to place, you expect McGee to place, you expect Parco to place, you expect Schultz to place. And if you had Teamer, you'd expect, you know, that's 5 locks pretty much. Yep. You're like, those guys are going to play. So I think I'm right. Like it's sort of 4.5 to 3.5. What they don't have is a guy that if he's healthy is a lock champ.
Correct.
You know, like Schultz would be ranked number 1. But again, if I'm right and Gable's coming back, I mean, he wrestled Gable as good as anybody's wrestled him, but the match wasn't a blowout on points, but wasn't super close, if that makes any sense for anybody who's watched wrestling. So I think that they can be – I think they're going to be under if Teamer's hurt. And I think they'll be over if not. Like I think they're going to score. One of those other guys will push through, but that's not going to make up for Teamer's points. But if Teamer can wrestle by the end of the year, then it's different. Do you sort of see it the same way?
I do. I think Arizona State is a legit team. Still some question marks in my mind. I still want to see some of these guys do it. But, yeah, I think they're another phenomenal dual team. So they just don't have any glaring, you know, holes in their lineup that you'd say, yeah, we're going to go out. You know, unless Teamer doesn't wrestle, you've got a problem there at one weight. But one weight out of 10 is not that bad, David.
Well, but no, it's a good point, because last year they had 2 or 3 holes. Like they lost to Princeton in a dual meet. Like they lost to Pitt in a dual meet. They won 6 of the 10 matches and lost the duel. You almost never see that.
Yep.
But like they were just getting hammered in the weights that they were bad at. And, you know, like I think on paper, like those guys would match up pretty well with like a Penn State or Iowa. You know, like they're kind of good where, you know, like if you looked at it sort of quickly, like they'd be, especially if like Spencer was on a pitch count early. Because you and me, when we do these matches, like, okay, can one team at least get to 5? Like Courtney would be favored at 25. McGee would be favored at 33. Parko would be favored at 49. If Teamer was wrestling, he'd be favored at 57, and Schultz would be favored at heavy. And you go, okay, so that's 5. You know, and then there's some other matches in there, like a Negron and a Kennedy is kind of a toss-up. You know, Kyle Valencia and Nelson Brand is kind of a toss-up. You know, like, you know, so you can kind of go, you know, Montalvo and Assad are kind of a toss-up. Like, obviously, Warner would be a big favorite. Real Woods would be a big favorite. But, you know, like, if you kind of, so, okay, like, there's more toss-ups. Like, it's 5 and 2 and 3 or 4, 3 and 3 if you go, well, Spencer's going to wrestle. You know, the thing that Iowa always has going for them in a dual meet is if it's 5-5, they're going to win on bonus.
Yeah, that happens.
So, so I think we got time to talk about one more team. I think what we'll do is we'll save our picks for next week because Grant will be with us anyway. So there's Ohio State's a very interesting team. So they've, you know, first of all, you saw the wrestle-off result where Karchla lost, right?
Yep.
So they're, I mean, they've got Heinzelman back. They've got Karchla back. They got Hilger back. They got a ton of talented freshmen. They got one of those 2 kids is going to go at 133. They got Ethan Smith back, but they don't have, I guess, unless I'm missing somebody, like, and Jordan Decatur won too. He beat D'Amelio at 41. So it doesn't mean anything. Like, I'd bet $1,000 that Carson Karchla is the starter in the Big Ten tournament for them. Yep. And I'd probably bet $500 that D'Amelio is the starter for them at the Big Ten tournament as well. I mean, barring injuries. They've got the 97-pounder back Hoffman that came out of nowhere and placed last year, like as a 20-something seed, was the lowest seeded guy to place, and, you know, almost helped my fantasy team win the national title. So, but they don't have a finalist. And their best guy is at a really good weight. Like if Carson Karchla is a 141-pounder, you're like, that dude's probably winning nationals. So what are your thoughts on Ohio State?
I'm going to project them to go a little bit over, David, because I do think they're a solid team.
So hold on. One source has them at 62. One has them at 43. And one has them at 55.5. So that's kind of nuts. So like if you pick the middle, it's like 50, like low 50s.
Yep.
So like 50, are you picking them over 53 or are you picking them over 63? Because you pick them over 63, I'm getting a wings bet in.
No, I'm going to pick them over 53. I
might still make a little bet with you.
Okay.
Okay.
Go ahead.
All right. I'll take the under.
All right.
Just on placement points.
Yep.
Okay. They're going to be one of the most fun teams to watch, though, because they're a team that, like a Bouzakis or whoever they start at 33,
Mendez.
Vasquez or Mendez, yeah. Mendez, like, huge upside. And people forget, like, Mendez was 1 point away from teching Seth Gross at the World Team Trials. And Seth Gross came all the way back and made it to the medal match, 2 medal matches at the Worlds. As a high school senior, I guess technically, I don't know what you call somebody when they're about to graduate. I think he's still in high school at the time in May. So, I mean, huge upside. So
they may not, you know, you said something about you don't see them with the finalist. Sammy Sasso could be a finalist for Ohio State.
That's who I'm freaking forgetting about. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, they've got a good team. You know, they got Smith at 74. They got, you know, a stud at 84. They've got some really, really quality guys. where they really need help is the heavyweight needs to get in that final, top 8. And that's, something that he's been in round of 12, but hasn't made that top 8. But it's such a tough weight to break in there. I don't know if it's going to happen.
That's kind of where Elam is, like with Missouri. So like the teams to talk about next week are like the Missouri, Michigan, Cornell, Minnesota, with the Wisconsins, those teams of the world. And, like I think Missouri's going to be, they're going to have that team. They always have like a bunch of dudes that are going to be in the round of 12 or 16 and a couple guys that I think will punch through. But I think next year, the year after when it's in Kansas City, I think they're a threat, like a big threat. So you want to do real quick picks, Iowa State, Wisconsin, excuse me?
Sure. We got time?
I think we got 3 minutes.
This is going to be a good duel, David.
Okay, I agree. All right, let me get a pen and paper here. So you can do the odds. I'll do the evens. Okay.
Okay.
So it's Barnett against Terrakina. Who you got?
I got Barnett -3.5.
By decision? No, we're just gonna pick like you and me will probably do this up here. So you got them him by decision. Okay, so you got Wisconsin by decision. Okay, and so do I. All right. I'll go Lamont over or versus Adesanya. I'll go Wisconsin decision again.
Agreed.
So this is the interesting match. Zargo, who's ranked 11, and against Swiderski. Flo picks Swiderski, which makes it interesting. On paper, Zargo is the favorite. Who you got?
Swiderski.
Just go first name Casey.
Decision. Casey. Decision.
You got Casey. I'm kind of on the hype train. I'll go with you. We got to pick something different. Gomez versus Pinheiro Johnson. I'm going to go Gomez by major.
I'm going to go Gomez by fall.
Fall.
Yep.
Right. Garrett Modal, ranked 19th. Isaac Judge, 24th. Who you got?
Modal by decision.
Okay. I will agree. Hamidi Carr. I'll take Carr decision.
Agreed.
Graham Calhoun versus number 17, Joel Devine.
Devine by decision.
I'm going to go Devine by major. Tyler Dow versus number 5, Marcus Coleman. I'm going to go Coleman by major.
Agreed.
Braxton Amos, number 23, versus younger Bastida, number 7.
Bastida by decision.
I'll agree. And then this is Hilger, number 11, versus Skylar, number 13. I'll take Hilger by decision.
Agreed.
Okay, so you've got it for Wisconsin 3, 6, 9. You've got it 18. You've got it 18, 16. I've got it 1, 2. I got it 16 for Wisconsin, 17 for Iowa State.
Okay.
So, but we both have it 5-5.
Yes.
So, basically, the difference is the big difference is you've got a pin where I've got a major, and I've got one more major for them, for Iowa State. So, but we agree on the 5-5, which means probably we'll be each wrong about 6 of those matches. So, all right. So for GT, who's on the road, again, follow him. The food posts are great. The hair is magnificent. Watch the Greco this weekend. Watch wrestling this weekend. Watch college wrestling this weekend. So for Mark, I'm David. Thank you guys for watching and listening. Speak to y'all next week.